Hello and welcome back to Silent Husband Club. We know it's been a while, thanks for your patience. From now on, we'll do our best to bring you a brand new story every single day. What would you do if, on the day you were supposed to say I do, you discovered the two people you trusted most had already said it, behind your back? This isn't just a story about betrayal, it's about the kind of pain that tears through bone, and the silence that follows when your whole world burns down. If this kind of story hits you deep, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment. Your support helps us grow, and you'll never miss an update. I never thought I'd be the kind of man who tells his story to strangers on the internet. But here I am, stripped of everything I believed in, staring at the ruins of what should have been the happiest day of my life. And maybe, just maybe, by telling this, I'll figure out how the hell it all went so wrong. My name's Ethan. I'm 36 years old. I was supposed to get married last week. Claire and I were together for 5 years, engaged for 1. From the outside, we looked solid, happy. Not perfect, of course. No couple is. We had our share of small fights, long silences, and cold dinners. But nothing that ever made me question her. Nothing that even came close to preparing me for what was coming. Looking back, I should have seen it. The signs were there. Claire had been distant for a while. Always glued to her phone. Changing plans at the last minute. Working late. Too late. But I trusted her. Blindly, stupidly. I never imagined I should be worried about my own brother. Logan. He's my younger brother by 5 years. Always the wild one. Never held a steady job, bounced from couch to couch, had a DUI that put him in jail overnight a few years back. Still, he was blood. And when he showed up to our engagement party looking cleaned up, sober, even polite, I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe he's turning it around. Claire was the one who suggested making him my best man. It'll be good for him, she said. Let's show him we believe in him. God. I was so damn proud of that moment. I thought we were building a family that could lift each other up. Turns out, they were already connected. The wedding was set at this beautiful lodge in the hills outside Asheville. Everything had gone to plan: the flowers, the catering, the music, the guests. Everyone was buzzing with excitement. And me? I was nervous, sure, but excited. Eager to see Claire walk down that aisle and start a new chapter with me. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 p.m. At 2:15, there was still no Claire. People were glancing around, whispering. The pianist kept repeating the same gentle notes over and over. And then I noticed it. Logan was missing, too. At first, I told myself they were probably sorting out last-minute details. Maybe her dress ripped. Maybe she was crying. Maybe she just needed her soon-to-be brother-in-law to help calm her nerves. I tried calling her. Straight to voicemail. Called Logan. Same thing. My stomach dropped. You know that kind of cold panic? The kind that starts at the base of your spine and climbs up like 1,000 ants crawling beneath your skin? That's what I felt. But I kept smiling. Kept pretending for the crowd. Until I couldn't anymore. At 2:30, I apologized to the guests and walked off fast. My mom tried to catch my arm, asking if everything was all right. I didn't answer. I just kept walking down the hall toward the bridal suite. That hallway, I'll never forget it. Long, quiet, dim. Like the air already knew what was waiting for me at the end of it. And then I heard it. Laughter. Claire's laughter. That light, musical sound that used to make my heart beat faster. But this time, it froze me in place. because underneath it, there was a man's voice. Deep. Familiar. Logan. I stood there for maybe a full minute. My hand was on the doorknob. Every part of me screamed something different: open it, run, scream, cry, punch the wall. But something heavier took over. The weight of knowing. The weight of truth. I opened the door. And the world I thought I knew shattered. There they were. Claire, still in her wedding dress, straddling Logan's lap as he sat on the vanity chair. His pants were around his ankles. Her dress was bunched at her waist. They didn't even notice me at first, that's how into it they were. I must have made some sound, a gasp, a grunt, maybe just the sound of my heart breaking in half, because they both turned suddenly. Claire's face went pale. Logan's eyes widened as he scrambled to pull his pants up. The silence in that room was louder than any scream. "Ethan," Claire whispered, stumbling off him. "It's not, I can explain." I couldn't speak. My throat felt like it was closing in on itself. I just stood there, staring. My fiancé. My brother. In each other's arms. On my wedding day. Logan, the bastard, had the audacity to say, "Hey, man, just calm down. Let's talk about this." That was the moment something inside me snapped. I launched at him, my fist connecting with his jaw before I even knew what I was doing. We crashed to the ground. Claire was screaming. I was yelling. Logan was cursing. My knuckles found his face again and again, and I didn't stop until I felt hands dragging me off him. The door had flown open behind me. Guests, family, friends were piling in. My father and uncle grabbed me, holding me back as Logan bled on the carpet. Claire sat on the floor, crying, her mascara streaming like black ink down her face. And I stood there, heart racing, sweat pouring, and one single thought repeating like thunder in my skull. They did this. On my wedding day. The room felt like it was closing in on itself. All I could hear was my own ragged breathing and the blood pounding in my ears. My dad's hands were firm on my shoulders, trying to keep me grounded, but my mind was still spinning from what I had just walked in on. Claire, my Claire, standing there in her torn-up wedding dress, shaking, crying, smudged and broken and still somehow trying to speak. Logan, bleeding, hunched over on the floor, not daring to look me in the eyes. And all around us, guests frozen in stunned silence. Friends. Family. People who had come to witness a celebration of love, now watching a catastrophe unfold in real time. What the hell is going on in here? My dad finally demanded, his voice sharp and low, trying to keep things under control. He looked between us all, his eyes flicking from Claire's ruined dress to Logan's bruised face to my clenched fists. My throat burned. I couldn't speak. I just lifted a trembling hand and pointed it right at them, at her, at him. My hand shook with fury, but the words wouldn't come. Claire was the first to break the silence. Her voice was a whisper, barely audible. We made a mistake," she stammered, still trying to straighten her dress. "Ethan, please, can we just talk about this? Privately?" That word, privately, it hit me like another punch to the gut. I let out a bitter, almost insane laugh. Privately? Privately? You want to talk privately after I just caught you screwing my brother in your wedding dress? There was a collective gasp in the room. My mother let out a strangled sound like a sob, and Claire's parents looked like they'd just been slapped across the face. Logan kept his head down, blood dripping from his nose onto his crumpled shirt, refusing to speak. I looked around the room, at all the people watching us with wide eyes and mouths hanging open. And then I said, with a coldness I didn't even recognize in my own voice, "Everyone out. Now." Except you two. No one moved at first, but then someone coughed, another whispered something, and slowly, the guests started filing out. A few of them gave me those looks, pitying, apologetic, uncomfortable. I didn't want their sympathy. I wanted answers. The door finally closed, and all that remained was silence. The kind that weighs on your chest like a boulder. I turned toward Claire and Logan, both standing apart now like guilty kids caught stealing. My voice was low, trembling with rage. Start talking. Claire tried to speak first, her voice shaking. Ethan, we didn't plan for this. It just happened. We didn't mean to hurt you. Bullshit, I snapped. This didn't just happen. You don't fall on top of someone by accident. You made a choice. Both of you. I looked from her to Logan, and then back. How long? She didn't answer right away. But then Logan cleared his throat and muttered, 6 months. My knees almost buckled. 6 months. Half a goddamn year. All while we were planning a wedding. Choosing the venue, tasting cakes, making seating charts. While I was writing vows, for God's sake, they were sneaking behind my back. Why? I asked, my voice barely a whisper now. Why not just end it? Why let it get this far? Claire stepped forward, slowly, cautiously. She reached out a hand to touch me, but I recoiled like she was toxic. We were going to stop. After the wedding. We both knew it was wrong, and we didn't want to ruin everything. I stared at her in disbelief. So you thought you'd just have one last go before walking down the aisle? Like some kind of farewell gift to yourselves? My voice cracked, anger and heartbreak fighting for dominance in my throat. She flinched, tears pouring freely now. It wasn't like that. Ethan, I still love you. Don't, I warned. Don't say that to me. You don't get to say that anymore. I turned to Logan. And you? You're my brother. My blood. How the hell could you do this to me? He looked up finally, eyes rimmed with red. I don't know. I was in a bad place. Claire and we connected. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I swear I didn't. I shook my head, unable to process the gall of it all. You didn't mean for it? You had 6 months to stop. 6 months to come clean. But you waited until today. Until I was standing at the altar wondering where the hell my bride was. Claire tried to speak again. We can work through this, Ethan. Please. We can go to therapy. We can. Therapy? I repeated, almost laughing again. You think a couple of sit-down sessions are going to fix this? She moved closer, desperation in her voice. I love you. I made a mistake, but I choose you. I still want to marry you. The insanity of it hit me like a second wave. You want to marry me? After all this? I do, she whispered. I stared at her hard. Then why didn't you act like it? Logan stepped forward, cautiously. Look, man. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I don't even expect it. But I swear, it's over between me and Claire. It was never real. Just a mistake. A selfish, messed up mistake. Yeah. I said. Well, congratulations. You two just made the biggest mistake of your lives. Claire's eyes were wild now. Ethan, please. Don't throw us away over one bad decision. One? I said, voice icy. This wasn't one moment. This was dozens of moments. You threw us away every time you opened the door to him. Every time you lied. Every time you looked me in the eye and told me you loved me. Then something in her snapped. Her tears dried in an instant, her face hardened. You know what? Maybe if you hadn't been so distant lately, so obsessed with work, maybe I wouldn't have needed to look somewhere else for attention. My jaw clenched. Are you seriously trying to blame me for this? She crossed her arms. Relationships go both ways, Ethan. You weren't exactly Prince Charming. I looked at Logan, but he looked away. Coward. You know what? I said slowly. Maybe you're right. Maybe I was distant. Maybe I wasn't perfect. But guess what? I didn't sleep with your sister. Her eyes widened, and for a second, she looked ashamed again. But only for a second. I want you both out, I said coldly. Now. Logan opened his mouth, maybe to protest, maybe to explain again. I didn't care. I raised a hand to stop him. Out, I repeated. Go crawl back to whatever hell you came from. I'll clean up this mess myself. Claire stared at me for a moment longer, her lips trembling. Then she scoffed, grabbed her torn dress, and stormed out. Logan followed slowly, not saying a word. And when the door slammed shut behind them, I finally let my knees give out. I sank to the floor, suit wrinkled, heart in pieces, and whispered the only thing that made sense anymore. What the hell just happened to my life? I don't know how long I sat there on the floor, staring at nothing, trying to make sense of a world that had just cracked open beneath my feet. My wedding suit was wrinkled and damp with sweat, the collar too tight, my tie loosened but still choking me. The silence in the room was heavy and dense, pressing in on my chest like the ceiling itself was collapsing. I don't remember crying. Not yet. At that moment, the pain hadn't found a way out. It just sat there, cold and paralyzing, somewhere between my ribs. A soft knock at the door pulled me out of the fog. I didn't answer. The door creaked open anyway. My dad stepped in, his face etched with concern, jaw tight with a kind of anger he rarely let anyone see. He looked at me for a moment, then slowly sank to the floor beside me, suit pants brushing the edge of the stained carpet where Logan's blood had dried into a dark smear. He didn't say anything for a while, and I was grateful for that. Just having him there, breathing beside me, was enough. Eventually, he cleared his throat and said quietly, "Your mom's talking to the guests. We told them there's been a situation. We're canceling the ceremony." I nodded slowly, still not looking at him. "Thanks," I said, my voice hoarse like I'd spent hours screaming. Maybe I had. He placed a firm hand on my shoulder. "You want to talk about it?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Not much to say, is there?" My fiancé and my brother were screwing in the bridal suite while I was waiting at the altar. I could hear the strain in my voice. It didn't sound like me. It sounded like someone else, someone drowning. My dad sighed deeply, and I saw him clench his jaw again. "I'm so sorry, son. If I'd known, if any of us had known," he trailed off, shaking his head in disbelief. I looked at him for the first time, really looked. "You didn't know?" "No," he said firmly. "None of us did. And if we had, I swear to God, this would have ended a long time ago." That was something. A small mercy. At least my parents hadn't been in on the lie. At least they hadn't seen it coming and let me walk blindfolded into that hell. "What do I do now?" I asked, and I hated how small my voice sounded. My father squeezed my shoulder. "Right now, you don't have to do anything. We'll handle the venue, the guests, the cleanup. You go home. Take care of yourself. You're in shock. I nodded again, because what else was there to say? The next few hours passed like a dream where everything's too bright and slightly off-center. My mother kept apologizing to guests with teary eyes and vague explanations. Friends and distant relatives hugged me carefully, their faces twisted with confusion and sympathy, and I wanted to scream at every one of them to go away. But I didn't. I stood still. I said nothing. By the time evening fell, the lodge was empty. The tables were still set for dinner, untouched, candles half burned, flowers beginning to wilt. I found myself sitting alone in the reception hall, surrounded by reminders of a life I had almost stepped into, a life that now felt like a cruel joke. The string lights overhead glowed softly, and the music playlist I'd spent hours curating still played faintly through the speakers. A love song drifted through the room, too gentle, too sweet. I almost threw a chair through the sound system. Instead, I just sat there. Until my mom came in, her voice soft and tired. "Ethan, sweetheart, it's time to go." I stood slowly. My legs were heavy, my body stiff. She took my hand and guided me to the car like I was a child again. We drove in silence. I was thankful for that. Every word felt like it would crack me open. When we reached my parents' house, I went straight to the room I'd stayed in the night before the wedding. I collapsed onto the bed fully dressed. My phone was vibrating nonstop, missed calls, texts, notifications. I turned it face down without looking. What was I supposed to say? "Hey, thanks for coming, sorry the bride banged my brother?" I stared at the ceiling for hours, not sleeping, not crying, not thinking, just floating in a strange kind of numbness that felt more dangerous than pain. The next morning was worse. Everything was real. Everything stuck. The house was quiet, too quiet. My parents tiptoed around like they were afraid I might shatter if they looked at me the wrong way. Around noon, I decided to go back to the apartment Claire and I had shared. I didn't want to, but I had to. She was gone. She texted me to say she picked up her stuff and left the key under the mat. That was it. No, I'm sorry. No, I love you. No begging. Just logistics. When I walked into the apartment, it was like stepping into a museum of a life that had already ended. The couch was still there. Her favorite mug was on the coffee table, lipstick stain still on the rim. A few unopened wedding cards sat on the kitchen counter, stacked neatly beside the registry gifts we'd never open. Her perfume no longer lingered in the bedroom, but the absence of it was loud. Too loud. I walked through the room slowly, like I was trying to feel something. All I felt was empty. On the nightstand beside our bed, my bed now, I found an envelope with my name on it. Claire's handwriting. My hands trembled as I picked it up. For a second, I considered tossing it in the trash. But curiosity always finds a crack. "Ethan," the letter began, "I know you probably hate me. And you're right too. What I did to you is unforgivable, and I will carry that guilt for the rest of my life. But I need you to know something. I did love you. I do. What happened with Logan, it wasn't about love. It was about feeling wanted. Feeling alive. That's not an excuse, it's just the truth." I stopped reading. I didn't want to hear her reasons. I didn't care about her guilt. I crumpled the letter in my hand and sat down on the edge of the bed, heart pounding, eyes burning. And for the first time since the wedding day, since the hell that swallowed me whole, I finally let go. I finally cried. Not quiet tears, not soft sobs. I wept. Loud, broken, animalistic sounds, into my fists, into the mattress, into the emptiness that echoed back. And when I was done, when I had nothing left in me, I lay there with the crumpled letter still in my hand, my throat raw, and I realized something terrifying. I wasn't crying because I missed her. I was crying because a part of me still loved her anyway. And that was the cruelest part of all. The days that followed blurred into one another, each one dragging like an anchor chained to my chest. I took a week off work without bothering to give a reason. My boss didn't press. Maybe he'd heard whispers from someone who'd attended the wedding that never was. Or maybe he just saw the deadness in my eyes when I sent that 2-sentence email and decided not to ask. I barely left the apartment. I didn't eat much. Didn't shower every day. Just moved from bed to couch and back again, haunted by the ghost of a future I'd spent years building. It wasn't until the third morning that I realized I couldn't stay there anymore. The apartment still smelled faintly like Claire, that blend of lavender shampoo and vanilla hand cream. Her laugh still echoed in the corners, and the pictures we hadn't yet taken down still mocked me from the walls. I couldn't heal in a place where every crack in the floor whispered her name. I needed out. I packed a bag, booked a last-minute rental cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and left. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not my parents, not my friends. I just drove until the signal faded and the road turned to gravel. When I stepped inside the cabin, it was nothing special. One room, a bed, a kitchenette, a wood stove, and a front porch that looked out over endless green. But it was silent. Blessedly, peacefully silent. And for the first time in what felt like years, I could breathe. The first couple of days were hard. The quiet wasn't gentle, it was brutal. Without distractions, I had no choice but to sit with everything I tried to avoid. The images wouldn't leave me. Claire's dress bunched at her waist. Logan's face as he looked up, caught red-handed. The trembling in her voice when she said she still wanted to marry me. My fists landing on my brother's face. Over and over, like a broken reel. At night, I'd lie in bed and stare at the ceiling, trying to remember the last time I had felt genuinely safe. The last time I had believed someone's words without dissecting them in my head. That trust, that deep, unshakable belief in someone else's love, it was gone. Torn out of me like a bad tooth, and now there was just a raw, infected space where it used to live. So I started writing. I didn't plan to. There was a journal on the bookshelf, left behind by whoever stayed there before me. I picked it up out of boredom, but once I started putting pen to paper, something broke loose inside me. I wrote everything. From the early days of me and Claire, the night we met at a bookstore downtown, our first road trip, the way she used to trace circles on my chest when she couldn't sleep, to the moment I opened that goddamn door at the lodge. It was painful. Excruciating. But the more I wrote, the more I could breathe. Like every word was a splinter pulled from my skin. I filled pages with rage, confusion, sorrow, guilt. I wrote letters I'd never sent to her, to Logan, to myself. Somewhere in that process, I realized something strange. I wasn't just grieving Claire. I was grieving the version of myself that had loved her without hesitation. That man, that wide-eyed, loyal fool, had died on the floor of a bridal suite. And no one but me had noticed. Midway through the week, I stepped out onto the porch one evening with a mug of tea and sat beneath a sky smeared with stars. The silence wasn't suffocating anymore. It felt sacred. Like I was finally alone with the only voice that mattered, mine. Claire's letter still echoed in my head sometimes, her words about feeling wanted and alive. I replayed them over and over, wondering how long she'd felt that way without saying anything. And yeah, it made me question myself. Was I inattentive? Distant? Had I become boring? Was I just a placeholder while she waited for excitement to knock on the door in the form of my brother? But then I'd remember, no one forced her to sleep with Logan. No one made him cross that line. Whatever cracks existed in our relationship, they didn't give either of them the right to shatter everything. You don't fix a leaky pipe by setting fire to the entire house. Still, I couldn't deny that some part of me had been asleep, going through the motions. Maybe I had loved her more in theory than in reality by the end. Or maybe I was just trying to protect what little pride I had left. On my final night at the cabin, I sat at the desk with the journal and flipped through what I'd written. Some of it was angry, some pathetic, some raw to the point of being hard to read. But it was mine. Honest. Real. The most real I'd felt in months. And I knew, deep down, that it was time to go back, not to the apartment, not to Claire, not to the wreckage, but to life. I left the cabin early the next morning with the journal in my backpack and something else I hadn't felt in a while: clarity. I didn't feel healed. Hell, I didn't feel strong. But I felt awake. Like a man who'd survived the fire and now stood in the ashes, not sure what he'd build next, only certain that it would be his. Returning to the city felt like stepping into someone else's life. The streets looked the same, my building was still there, but I was different. I couldn't go back to the apartment, not the one Claire and I had shared. I knew that the walls were soaked in memories I couldn't bear to relive. So I started fresh. I found a small place on the other side of town, 1 bedroom, barely furnished, quiet. I painted the walls myself, bought mismatched furniture, hung up prints of mountain landscapes, and let the space slowly become mine. Not ours. Not hers. Just mine. Work was next. I requested a transfer to a different department, something more hands-on, more demanding. I needed to be tired at the end of the day. I needed to come home and not think. To collapse into bed with muscles aching instead of memories. My boss agreed, no questions asked. I think he saw something in me, or maybe he recognized the look of a man trying to keep himself from falling apart. My new team was welcoming. Polite, but distant enough to not ask about my personal life. I was grateful for that. At the same time, I started seeing a therapist. I wasn't sold on the idea at first. Talking to a stranger about the worst moments of your life doesn't exactly sound appealing. But it helped. It helped to have someone sit across from me and not pity me, not judge me, not try to fix it, just listen. I talked about the betrayal, the shame, the anger that still rose in my throat like bile every time I heard Logan's name. I talked about Claire's letter, and how part of me wanted to burn it, and another part wanted to believe it. I talked about the guilt I felt, guilt for not seeing it sooner, guilt for maybe being too emotionally absent, guilt for still feeling something when I thought I should be empty. And the therapist told me something simple that stuck with me: pain doesn't follow logic. And healing doesn't follow a schedule. Slowly, I began to rebuild a routine. I got back into the gym. Started running again. Reconnected with a few friends I hadn't seen since the engagement party. Most of them didn't know what to say, but they showed up, invited me out, bought me beers, laughed too loudly in awkward silences. It was enough. It reminded me that I wasn't alone. And then, one afternoon at an indoor climbing gym, something I'd always wanted to try but never had, I met Emma. She wasn't flashy. She didn't try to impress. She was just present. Confident in a quiet way. She saw me staring at the harnesses like I was about to pass out and offered to show me the ropes, literally. We climbed for about an hour, mostly in silence, her giving me pointers and catching me when I slipped. At the end, as I was about to leave, she asked if I wanted to grab a coffee sometime. And I surprised myself when I said yes. Emma and I didn't fall into each other. There were no sparks, no violins, no dramatic kisses in the rain. It was slower than that. Gentler. She asked questions, but never pushed. She gave me space, but let me know she was there. I told her not all of it, not yet, but enough. Enough for her to understand that I was still carrying wounds that hadn't closed. And she didn't flinch. One evening, I got a message from Logan. He wanted to meet. Said he'd been going to therapy. Said he wasn't looking for forgiveness, just wanted to talk. I didn't respond right away. My hands hovered over the phone for a long time. A part of me was curious to see if he looked as wrecked as I felt. Another part wanted to block his number forever. But eventually, I agreed. We met at a quiet bar, far from anywhere I used to go. Logan looked tired. Hollow. He apologized immediately. Not the kind of half-assed sorry you say to clear your conscience, but the kind that sits heavy in the chest. He didn't make excuses. He didn't beg. He told me he was ashamed. That he didn't even understand why he did what he did. That losing me as a brother hurt more than anything he'd ever felt. I listened. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just listened. And when he finished, I said, I don't forgive you. Maybe one day, but not today. And he nodded like he already knew. A few weeks later, I ran into Claire. It was in a cafe I didn't normally go to. She looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but emotionally. Like someone who had shrunk into herself. She smiled, nervously, and asked if she could sit. I didn't say no. She told me she was sorry. That she hoped I was healing. That she hoped I was happy. I told her I wished her peace. That we were done. That there was no path back. And for the first time, I felt the weight begin to lift. It wasn't dramatic. No screaming, no final blowout. Just a quiet goodbye between two people who had destroyed something once beautiful. And when I walked out of that cafe, I didn't look back. The months that followed felt like rebuilding a house from the foundation up. Everything had been gutted, ripped apart, down to bare beams, but somehow, in that rawness, I'd found clarity. Emma and I kept things slow. Deliberately slow. There were no declarations, no promises written in sky blue ink. Just two people walking beside each other, cautiously hopeful. Sometimes, we talked about the past. Sometimes, we didn't. She never pushed, and that alone gave me more comfort than 1,000 reassurances ever could. With her, there were no shadows creeping around corners, no need to pretend I was more healed than I was. She saw the cracks, and she didn't flinch. One afternoon, I got a call from my father. He told me that Logan had stopped by the house again. Not for drama, just to talk. To sit with our parents and try, in whatever small way, to own the damage he'd done. My father asked me gently if I'd ever be willing to see him again. I was quiet for a long time. The truth is, the mention of Logan's name didn't burn like it used to. It stung, sure, like pressing a bruise you'd almost forgotten was there, but it didn't paralyze me. I told my dad, maybe one day. But not yet. That was the most honest answer I could give. Forgiveness, I'd learned, wasn't a door you kicked open. It was a path, narrow and full of thorns. You could walk it. You just didn't have to run. My old apartment, the one I'd once shared with Claire, had long been sold. I never went back. There were too many ghosts packed into the corners of that place. But the new space, the one I'd built piece by piece, had become home in a way that apartment never truly was. Emma helped me pick out a few plants for the windowsills. We hung prints from local artists. We started making a ritual out of cooking dinner together every Sunday. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever is, but it was real. Honest. Quiet. And that was enough. Some nights I'd still think about Claire. not out of longing, but out of reflection. The way a soldier might run their fingers over an old scar. I didn't hate her anymore. Not really. I just didn't need her anymore. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need her regret. The chapter had closed. Whatever we had, it was buried not with resentment, but with finality. One evening, after a long day, I found a letter in my mailbox. Handwritten. No return address, but I knew the handwriting before I even opened it. Claire. It was short, a single page. She wrote that she hoped I was doing well, that she would always carry guilt for what she'd done, but also gratitude for what we had before it fell apart. She said she hoped I'd found peace. That I found someone who could see me the way she no longer had. I read the letter once. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I folded it up, placed it in a drawer, and never opened it again. Emma and I eventually took a short trip to the mountains, to a small cabin not far from where I'd once gone alone to pick up the broken pieces of myself. We hiked. We cooked over fire. We talked under stars. At one point, she looked at me and asked, "What do you want your life to look like, Ethan?" Not what others expect. Just you. What do you want? I thought for a long moment. Then I said, I want a life that feels like mine. Not borrowed. Not half-lived. Mine. She smiled. Then let's build it. That night, I lay awake in that quiet cabin, listening to her breathing beside me, and realized that I hadn't just survived the worst day of my life. I'd moved through it. I had walked across fire and come out the other side, scarred, yes, but still standing. Stronger. Wiser. Quieter. No longer begging for love in the wrong places. No longer searching for validation from people who had already chosen to leave. A year after the day that should have been my wedding, I sat on my small balcony, tea in hand, watching the sunset melt into the skyline. No tears. No rage. Just stillness. The kind of stillness that only comes after a storm has passed. I thought about Claire. About Logan. About the man I used to be. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel pride. Just acceptance. And in that moment, with the sky turning gold and the air warm on my skin, I finally said goodbye not just to them, but to everything I used to be. It wasn't the life I'd planned. But it was finally, truly, mine.
Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, shocked you, or simply made you think, don't keep it to yourself. Leave a comment, your thoughts, your story, your truth. Subscribe for more raw, real, and unforgettable confessions. And if this story made you feel seen, share it. Someone else might need to hear it too. You're not alone here. This channel is a safe space for those who've been betrayed, broken, and rebuilt.